For over a decade now, MOBAs have been a titan of esports thanks to their ever-evolving gameplay and massive fanbase, with League of Legends and Dota 2 leading the charge, boasting insane prize pools of over $40 million. Over the years, many companies have tried to recreate the massive success of these games, often failing due to a lack of original ideas or unpolished gameplay. In short, most new MOBAs just feel like a knockoff of existing ones. But in the shadows, one studio was lurking, creating a game that aimed to refine the genre down to its purest form and claimed to be the ultimate battle arena game. With fluid, fast-paced gameplay, it looked like it had a chance to rise to the top, but before its ascent could even begin, its foundation would start to crumble. This is what happened to Battlerite. Battlerite was developed by Stunlock Studios, a small team from Sweden who made a name for themselves with their first game, Bloodline Champions. Bloodline Champions was released in January of 2011 and would be a first of its kind, a niche game which stripped away many staples of the MOBA genre and focused on one core aspect, the team fight. While typically the goal of a MOBA is to capture or destroy some kind of objective, Bloodline Champions simply put players in a small arena and told them to kill each other. Kill the entire enemy team and you win a round, win 3 rounds, and you win the match. Unfortunately, Bloodline Champions never gained much traction. 2011 was a different time. Social media wasn't as big as it is now, and with a lack of marketing, word of the game didn't spread very far, and it was easily overshadowed by Dota and League of Legends. While the core concept of the game was great, it was not beginner-friendly at all. Plus, being the studio's first game, it lacked polish. On top of all this, the servers were not very good, so it was difficult to play, even for those who liked it. Because of this, Bloodline Champions slowly faded away, officially being closed down in 2014. After this, Stunlock Studios would work with another team to create Dead Island Epidemic, a game which would barely see the light of day as it was shut down within a year of its announcement. And then, nothing new would come out of the developer for nearly a year, until February of 2016, when they teased a new project called Battlerite. Within the next month, the official trailer would drop, revealing a brand new battle arena game, which was a spiritual successor to Bloodline Champions. Slowly, hype began to build around the game's reveal. And even though their previous title never really popped off, the niche audience who played it were sure that Stunlock Studios was going to deliver a great experience. And deliver, they did. Battlerite would release in paid early access in September of 2016. The game took what people loved about Bloodline Champions and improved on it, while fixing many of the issues of the original, like poor servers. By now, League of Legends and Dota 2 were staples of the MOBA genre, and people were a bit more willing to try something new. Battlerite's gameplay is what set it apart from other multiplayer battle arena games. Unlike its competitors, Battlerite was not a massive time commitment. While a game of League would take a minimum of 20 minutes, a game of Battlerite would take 10 minutes max. Apart from the length of matches, Battlerite's control scheme deviated heavily from other games in the genre. Typically in top-down MOBAs, a character's movement is controlled with the mouse and their abilities with keybinds. Battlerite bucks this trend by binding movement to the WASD keys so that the mouse can be used exclusively for aiming abilities, which is good because pretty much all abilities in the game, even characters' basic attacks, are skill shots. This move away from auto-targeting spells shifts the focus away from typical macro objectives like positioning and lane pushing and gets right down to the micro, outmaneuvering opponents, landing skill shots, and winning fights.
Hey! Predicted it! Mastermind calculator.
Thanks to the rise of streaming services like Twitch, the team was able to market Battlerite much more easily than Bloodline's Champions, and did so by sponsoring streamers to play their game on launch, a practice we're all familiar with now. Fortunately, on top of paying people to play it, many streamers just really liked the game, and with all the praise surrounding its initial release, the game was able to reach a total of 200,000 players in its first month.
Ooh, let's get it! I'm the best, run!
With this much success for an indie game, it's hard to imagine how the game would end up inactive today. But this is where the story takes a turn. The first issue, and the issue that would haunt the developers for the entirety of the game's lifespan, was player retention, or a lack thereof. This initially started thanks to the fact that for the first 3 months of the game, there was no ranked mode, which meant regardless of whether you felt like you were improving or not, there was no real goal to work towards. There was also a lack of content updates. We take for granted how massive companies like Riot are able to pump out updates every 2 weeks, and small companies like Stunlock just don't have the resources to do the same thing. While the team worked their hardest to balance the game as much as possible, they simply couldn't keep up with the community's demands. Another major issue was Battlerite's focus on competitive play. While this was initially one of the game's selling points, it would also turn out to be one of the game's shortcomings. With a focus on having to constantly land precise skill shots, the game became unwelcoming to casual players.
The only people who play Battlerite are like gamers, like real hardcore like gamers.
Real gamers.
Real gamers. You know what I mean?
For example, the support role in most games is often seen as an entry point for beginner players, but looking at a support in Battlerite, that ease of access is not there. Let's look at Sirius, a utility healer. His heals run a 3-charge system and are all small zone skill shots, meaning you have to track your teammates' movement while they are fighting or else they won't get healed. On top of this, with the game's small team size, it's also expected that while healing, he's also in the middle of combat, putting out damage. As cool as this type of character may sound for a veteran MOBA player, it's just not very accessible to beginners. It's almost necessary to have characters like Blitzcrank or Mercy in the game to allow even casual players to make a big impact on the game thanks to their easy to understand movesets. And where games like League of Legends have multiple map objectives like Baron and Dragon, which allow you to gain an upper hand without having to directly engage with your opponent, Battlerite doesn't offer much in terms of macro gameplay besides trying to capture the central orb. This means if you can't beat your opponent in a straight fight, you're just gonna lose, further alienating the casual audience. This theme of focusing strictly on hyper-competitive gameplay would become even worse when the Battlerite Pro League rolled around. Ultimately, this would prove to be one of the worst decisions for the game. Despite a boost from the game's official free-to-play launch, the game's player base would quickly begin to drop once more, and with the Pro League being revealed, it almost seemed like Stunlock was oblivious to what was going on within their own community. While a company creating its own professional league is pretty normal today, it only makes sense to do so when you have a strong core audience who is invested in the game. In fact, it could barely manage to hold a stable audience at all. In the end, the Battlerite Pro League ran for 3 seasons, but failed to pull in any notable number of new players. After this, Battlerite's content cycle began to slow significantly. With no major gameplay changes outside of a few characters being added, fans were beginning to grow tired of the repetitive gameplay loop they had. Since its release, the community had been clamoring for the game to implement more game modes. Not wanting to keep their fans in the dark for too long, Stunlock shocked everyone by announcing that they would be releasing their take on the popular Battle Royale genre. While it certainly wasn't what the fans were expecting and was met with some skepticism, it appeared that the game mode actually had some promise. The main thing it had going for it was the fact that most BR games were shooters, and including MOBA elements was uncharted territory. At this point, die-hard Battlerite fans were just excited for anything that might breathe new life into the game, and since it was advertised as a free update, and the team promised it wouldn't impact development on the base game, there was really nothing to complain about. And so, players happily awaited its release. August 2018 can only be described as the final nail in the coffin. Battlerite Royale is officially revealed, but not as it was promised. Quote, "With the constraints from Arena limiting us, and after seeing the huge reaction from Battlerite Royale's announcement, we made the decision to protect the integrity of both experiences and create a new game instead of a new game mode." That's right, instead of adding on to the base experience, Battlerite Royale would be an entirely separate game. On top of this, it was a standalone title players would have to pay $20 for, rather than the free update that was promised initially. And while players who bought the original game in early access were offered 50% off, it still wasn't enough for players to forgive this breach of trust. Fortunately, when Battlerite Royale released, it was actually considered to be pretty fun. It was a unique enough twist on the BR concept, and had enough polish to feel like it warranted its own product. But unfortunately, the damage had been done. Having burned their player base, it was hard for the community to feel like this new game wasn't just some cash grab gimmick. On top of this, despite their original promise, production on the original game slowed down significantly, as the studio was clearly trying to capitalize on the launch of the Battle Royale. Battlerite and its Royale counterpart would slowly fade into obscurity. The original title's player count sits at roughly 360 concurrent players on average, and the Royale version sits around 60, just barely enough to fill up 3 games. While that's where the story ends, Battlerite truly was a fantastic experience, and many believe it had the potential to become one of the greats if it just had a more community-driven focus. And while it's unknown if Stunlock will ever come back with another game, Battlerite has left its mark on the industry and set the standard for what a teamfight based MOBA can really be. This video is made possible thanks to our wonderful patrons. Massive thank you to everyone on this list, and shout out to Jason, Foxy, Lyra, Mauve, Nate, Nathan, Sierra, Shoopy, Shampoo, Weeboo, and Spartacus for being platinum supporters, and an extra special shout out to Mookie, Noodles, Marco, and Steven for being diamond supporters. Thanks for sticking with us. If you also want to support the channel and unlock perks, check out the Patreon link in the description below or join our Discord server. If you want to help us out in a different way, leaving a like, subscribing, and hitting the bell to stay up to date is also appreciated. My name is Jonah. Thanks for watching.